animals have to take such good care of their voices and be so careful because their voices, they're an instrument, and I feel the same way as a podcaster. I don't think that most opera singers are making the choice to smoke weed, and that makes sense.
Yes. I'm having to come down from a little bit of stress with my animals, and Bunny is freaking out about the cat, and the cat, who just begged to come in, is trying to rip up my carpet to get outside.
The joys of motherhood are ceaseless. It's like one of my favorite relatable animal mom videos that I have of Quinn, where I am recording Pinkerton hanging out in the backyard, and Quinn in the background says, "All we can do is hope that she exhausts herself."
That is how I'm feeling right now, and I want to...
She was in her puppyhood.
Yeah, obviously Pinkerton is not that way anymore, and I'm so grateful for all of my animals, and I love them so much, but I am irritated right now, and sweaty, and want to scream, and have a pit in my chest, and annoyed. So sorry to start the episode on this tone, and I wish that I was not an animal steward who ever got that feeling. I wish that I was just like, never get irritated at the animals, like just peace and love, only think the best of them. That is how I feel deep down when I don't think that they're doing anything on purpose to be a handful and to be annoying and to rub me the wrong way, but sometimes I am not evolved enough, and I'm just like, I'm gonna have to take some deep breaths. I know I love this, and I know it will roll off my back soon enough, and I'll be daydreaming about my animals. Can't wait to get outside to them after this, but
here's the good news. Number one, I don't think that there is a reality where you're with other living things and it never feels annoying and frustrating and like an overwhelming day, whether you're a farmer that truly loves growing and soil science and all of those things. There are days that that's gonna be like, this is a bitch today. This really handed it to me. If you're a mom, even though your 100% truest feeling is, I love my kids more than anything, this is my fiercest passion, there are times that they are extremely irritating and pushing me to my limits, and fill in the blank, that's always the case. And number two, I know for a fact that recording this episode is going to change your energy, and you are going to feel renewed by the end. And that's the great thing about feelings, is even when we feel them and allow ourselves to, and it's a good thing to acknowledge them, they don't have to linger longer than they need to.
Yes. I feel that there may be a buildup from multiple things happening in the world around us, and I am maybe having teary eyes, and to the point where it's just like, I have so much privilege to live in such a like comfortable and safe and very much like living my dream, getting to have such a like truly a beautiful, wonderful, privileged, comfortable life, and also am very sensitive to and aware of what's going on in the world and the Epstein files. Like, I definitely went down a road of too much hyperfixation on that the past few days, and like have just gotten into an incredibly overwhelmed headspace about it. And obviously most of this is not new news, but it's still just, I think social media too can just like really where I consumed most of, not all of though. I was like looking into this information from different news sources also, but was on Instagram and then just getting fed like reel after reel of this just like doom, horrible shit. And I'm also aware of what's happening with ICE in this country and just also your everyday racism and misogyny, etc. And yesterday I got to the point where like I got off of work, spent a couple of hours in that headspace and like going down that rabbit hole, and Sean encouraged me to, it was literally frickin' 9:30 at night, but Sean was like, why don't you go out to the horses and like do their routine out there with them and just spend that time with them. And I feel so lucky to have them out there, that they're just such a grounding presence. And I did feel way better than I would have if I just tried to get over that myself in my house, like being outside in the cold air and being with my animals. That really helps me come down and decompress. Most of the time, jokes on me for this afternoon, how I feel. But anyway, I am having major waterworks and I'm now going to feel dry on my face this whole episode, so great.
That is the damn of crying when it is a good release and you're like, I am puffy and dry and I just cry. Quinn and I was plenty of times after having just done either our like morning or nighttime routine. In the morning we just put on our sunscreen and then our feeling like we might have a cry coming on, and you're like, last thing I want is to cry off my sunscreen right now. But I think that is all extremely fair feelings to have and good to be able to articulate and talk about. I just feel so proud that of you in particular, and also in general, like as a generation, I think that we have done some really great work as young people, starting like when we were young, having the sense to articulate your feelings and bring them into a conversation with other people, to be able to have, whether it's a relationship like where someone can relate to that, or just to understand someone else's feelings better, even if they're different than your own. I think that's such a constructive thing that a lot of previous generations have voiced, that feels very hard and scary to them, and not something that was like encouraged and embraced. And
yeah,
I think
it's just obviously plenty of people from our generation too, like Sean, totally. Very much, I think, men in general, but not sweepingly across all of them, but oftentimes have felt more shut down in their emotions. And like women have, what we know we have is each other to talk to. Not to say that all women are receptive in this way, but like I have felt very much throughout my life that I can find my community of girls or women to get deep with and be held in a space, even if then there is something that's like that departs from that because there is a sense of drama in a friend group or something like that. Like I have still felt like I can really get deep and be open and honest with my feelings for the most part without like judgment in that moment. And I think that a lot of men just haven't felt encouraged from boyhood to be able to be vulnerable and share,
but literally punished.
Yeah. But I have so many feelings for this episode. I want to say, first of all, happy Black History Month. Black history is important this month and always, and I'm so grateful for the trailblazers and black activists who have made strides in our understanding of black history and American history. And I mean, the amount of things that black people have like paved the way for and haven't been given that credit is like, we could talk for days about that. But this is the 100th anniversary of Black History Month, and I believe, like, I think there's a little bit of technicalities there. Maybe it's been 50 years since it was more like nationally accepted, and way more recent history that it's been like actually, I think, widely like like embraced and participated in by more people. But we want to talk some Black history on this Q&R code episode, and one of the things I want to say off the bat is Riley and I sharing our feelings on a topic like this. To me, it just like, it should be way more commonly in a diverse spectrum of people's mouth and wavelength. Like, I just think these conversations should happen more often, and I think Riley and I today will be pointing out multiple people, like current figures and black people that we admire. And it's sometimes when we're talking in these episodes and I say like an ally or an advocate, like even that, just it feels weird because it feels like I can feel like that conveys like I am trying to prop these people up as if they need that or something. Like, I think that black and brown people are very capable of setting the stage for themselves. Like, there's a nuance here where people that look like me and come from a background like me need to be making it very clear and public that like we support these people because they're people, and there's so much history that has taken their personhood and freedoms away from them. And also, I don't want to come at it in a way that's like a white savior complex of like, allow me to present you these people. Like, no, they're just amazing, incredible people that I admire and people that motivate me and have educated me so much. Like I'm saying, the people we're going to talk about, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I think there's a little bit of I need more practice in figuring out my words of how to convey the way I want to support black people.
Yeah, I think terminology can just feel so awkward and clunky, and when you use a label like advocate and ally, it can sometimes feel, for me, trepidatious, because it's like I don't want to act as if there's any level of authority or expertise there. It's meant to demonstrate like a solidarity and where your heart and intentions are, but feeling like I, of course, don't think that I am the leader for this topic and the person to turn to for this information. But it's important to me, and I want to speak in the circles around me about all of the issues that are important to me. If it's social justice, environmental justice, all of the different things that I do care about are worth speaking to. But like Quinn said, it's not like, oh my gosh, we're the ones to turn to. It's just actually genuinely so much more interesting to broaden the scope of the people that you're looking into, whether they're contemporary figures or historical figures, and to learn. We are passionate about learning, and that always opens your perspective. And it's kind of like how I feel about DEI programs at schools and whatnot, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like, of course, it would be great if we didn't have to specifically try to include certain groups of people more, because it should default be that like education is an inclusive space. But we know that's not how these institutions were designed, and that's not how, by just leaving it up to people trying to do the right thing, has not been effective. And I think that you have to put energy towards the things that are important to you. So I think that it's awesome having like a history month where, of course, all year we should be learning Black history. I would love to learn just all. Who was it? Someone the other day was talking about with immigration, about how we don't really learn Mexican history at all in the United States growing up, even though that is such a recent relationship of Mexico's territory being pushed way down to where it is now, when we know that the area that was considered Mexico went all the way up to Colorado, and was a way more massive area. So just the more you can learn, the better. Why not? We have the rest of our lives to continue to expand our awareness, and there are so many resources to turn to for that, for people that are experts or have perspective in that area. So I'm going to share some of those today, and leave it up to you to continue to really learn more about it, because clearly, looking at Quinn and I think it's fair that we're not the people to speak to the Black experience, and all we want to do is continue to be open to those perspectives and learn, because it's no secret. It feels like shameful always to say, because we care about different groups and diversity, but the fact of the matter is we did not grow up in a place with a lot of Black people, and that was not prioritized in our education. It was very much so an education that would, maybe in Black History Month talk about the big figures, Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman and those ones, but I did not feel that that was strongly integrated into our education. Thank goodness we lived in a place that taught about slavery and the Civil War. Still probably a biased lens, but there are people that literally grew up learning such misinformation about those events. Yeah. But all that is to say, I think that it was really going off to college, having that growing up come to reality moment of being like, oh, because I'm an open-minded person, I had a kind of felt like this isn't an issue for me. That's not, like, I knew I didn't have a lot of that awareness, but as we know, sometimes learning and being in a place like college is just what you need to humble you, to be like, the more I learn, the more I realize there is to know, and the more small my perspective feels. That was the first time that I had ever heard the term anti-racism, and this is the first book that really introduced me to it. Probably for a lot of white people this is the case, or just people in general. I know Ibram X. Kendi has been a really prominent scholar on anti-racism, and his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is a great place to start with this work. It's just very well done, and if it's okay, I just want to read the inner flap, because I think it gives such a more competent overview of the theme of anti-racism than I'm able to on my own. It says, The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it and then dismantle it. Anti-racism is a transformative concept that reorients and re-energizes the conversation about racism and, even more fundamentally, points us toward liberating new ways of thinking about ourselves and each other. At its core, racism is a powerful system that creates false hierarchies of human value. Its warped logic extends beyond race, from the way we regard people of different ethnicities or skin colors, to the way we treat people of different sexes, gender identities, and body types. Racism intersects with class and culture and geography, and even changes the way we see and value ourselves. In How to Be an Anti-Racist, Kendi takes readers through a widening circle of anti-racist ideas, from the most basic concepts to visionary possibilities, that will help readers see all forms of racism clearly, understand their poisonous consequences, and work to oppose them in our systems and in ourselves.
Very good. I completely agree that it's important to call out what it is and name it and realize, and I think that's a huge deconstruction process I continue to go through. Is like, it would be just absolutely ignorant for me to act like I don't have racist preconceptions in the world, I guess. It is recent history that there is blatant racism in my family. Like, that's just the truth. As uncomfortable as it is to say, I know that. I know that that's the truth, and I know that the systems I'm in, like, the life that we have been born into that gives us so much access to, even just that we grew up being like, oh, obviously we're going to have a career. Obviously we're going to have a roof over our head. We are going to be able to, like, walk through this life with opportunity and get to seize the day in the way we want. Like, that is a system that so many black people just aren't afforded that system in America. Like, of course there are.
I think, like he said in the flap, it's an intersecting thing where there's race privilege, like white privilege that we have, and then there's class privilege. So if you're from, a black family that has had class advantage for more generations, that's of course going to be more advantageous to you than someone that's like been in the cycle of poverty. So there's we know that there's always nuance there, but just adding on to your thought.
Definitely. There are so many ways I want to fully articulate this feeling, and it's just, I know that it's recent in my life to be as critically, like, very calling out and aware of racism. Like, it's like what you said. I always thought I was aware of that through growing up. Like, you think, oh, if I don't hold these feelings as a white person, like, I am not racist, but it takes a lot more than feeling like, oh, I'm not adding to it, to actually not be adding. To not add to it and to not uphold racist systems, it takes becoming an anti-racist. So there's effort beyond just being like, oh, I'm avoiding actively being racist. That's not how it works. But to someone that I would love to shout out, someone that we have had, that we have spoken about multiple times on this podcast, would be our dog trainer, Sailor Jerry, who Riley discovered, I'm sure, on Instagram when looking to find help with Roger going through, like, reactivity training. And so Riley and I have both done virtual training with Jerry, who is a awesome black horse girl, dog lover, just intelligent influencer in Kansas, right? I believe. And she uses her platform to do a lot of education, and she's right now, like, specifically, I feel like as of recent, her page is becoming even more like a lot of educational content on Black history and feminism, and I think she's very direct about how she approaches educating people on issues, and she's very upfront about that, like, right. She is just going through a time in her life basically saying just no more to white women bossing her around and telling her what to do, and it has been so important for me seeing how she's talking about this, because I think that white people do, and white women do specifically, have a lot of sensitivity toward how Black people and Black women take up space, and even just like the notion of Black people being aggressive or being too much. And I just think that, like, following an account like that, she is very inspiring to me, because she's not going to hold back to make you comfortable, and I don't think that being comfortable is a productive way to grow in a system like this where, like, growth matters so much.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't even gonna bring this up, but that just reminded me of the book I'm currently reading. It's called The Rich People Have Gone Away by Regina Porter, and it's a novel, but it definitely has a lot of themes about race and identity. It's by a Black author, and there are parts of it reading it where I realize, like, I don't really understand what's being said here, because it's like a culture that I'm not a part of. And that's the cool thing about getting to read stories and putting yourself in someone else's shoes that you haven't been in before, I think has been shown to really help increase people's empathy. But there's also definitely a liberal white woman character that feels very much so the energy of, well, not only the energy, she literally will say, like, I don't have a biased bone in my body, and claiming that sort of energy. I understand the sentiment as a person that feels like I don't want to be that way because I don't agree with that and I morally think that's wrong. That doesn't mean that you're exempt from the things that we all grow up with. As we know, people of color are not just automatically exempt from holding racist ideologies. It's part of culture and how you're socialized, and that it takes examination, and we make mistakes. It's about not feeling like the cancel culture vibe of, I'm gonna cut you out for this thing and make that a character assassination, and being like, of course, there are times where someone has been extremely wrong for a long time and they do not deserve to have a platform. But in general, people can be called in more to be like, hey, I have had this happen to me by people in my life that it feels very uncomfortable in the moment, but is very appreciated for anyone to have the vulnerability to be like, hey, I know that this was not your intention, but this, as like a person of color, hearing you say this is like not appreciated by me, and it feels like this to me to hear that sort of a comment. And I remember in college the first time that it was in even my awareness, because I complimented a Black woman's hair that I thought looked so beautiful, and this is a nuanced situation as well, but she was like, I don't mind that, like, I appreciate it, but just so you know, like, there are a lot of Black women that just would rather not hear it from a random white girl about their hair. And it's like, okay, fair enough. Now that's information to have. Sorry.
Something that happens with white women, that another thing I saw on Jerry's account was a clip of like this notion that just like the men who were saying not all men, now there are white feminists saying not all white women, about the notion of that there are white women that very much I just lost the word.
Not all white women is crazy. That is
like there, but there are a lot of white liberal often women that, because they feel like, oh, my heart is in the right place and I'm trying to be kind and I'm trying to be thoughtful and I'm trying to be nice, miss the mark and are not able to hear the criticism or the accountability of like, yeah, that isn't serving me. Like, if you wanted to genuinely do something kind and I'm telling you that that compliment didn't serve me, so then you're serving yourself. Like,
yeah.
You...
And also just saying, like, not me, taking that accountability off of you. If you feel like that feedback is, like, not something that you want, that you feel you need to work on, I think that you can still accept that and hear what someone has to say, and you can always make the decision of, like, I don't think I'm going to listen to that because someone else has a different perspective or whatever, but there's so much this, like, deep desire, I think, in people to not want to be wrong or to have messed up or to have hurt someone, that then it just becomes hurtful anyway, because you're so, like, refusing to hear. We all know intention isn't everything. I've been in situations with Quinn, who I am on most of the by far most similar page to than anyone else, and have been like, wow, that was not my intention in that interaction with you, and I am surprised that is, like, how you feel based off of my action with that, because that's so not what I wanted to have happen, but that still is the case, you know?
Yeah. I think if you are feeling very uncomfortable with how someone is calling out your kind or your type or whatever, it might be worth looking in the mirror and reflecting on why that would bother you to hear that type of a call out, because you might be part of the problem. And it really is, like, that to me was such a obvious, like, comparison once you think about it, but hearing that compared of the men who are being like, not all men, instead of being like, yeah, so many men are doing unacceptable, like, as a patriarchy there is a huge problem, and then white women right now being called out by black women, or obviously other groups too, but in this case that's what I'm talking about, and then being like, oh, I didn't mean it like that, we're just trying to be nice. It's like, no, but yeah, like you said, the intention is not everything. Like, the blue bracelet or whatever is not what black women want and need, as far as I understand, for the most part, to exemplify your allyship. They're asking for you to do the deep digging about the ways you might be actually upholding the system in a meaningful way, that you have, like, the concept of white woman tears, and how white women are extremely powerful with accusations. We have seen people sentenced to death, not even sentenced to death, people just have lynched. Been lynched, like, in recent history, from white women making a false claim because they're racist. So there's a big impact, and I think that hey, everyone, this is where I can hear it from the conservatives about snowflakes, because it's like, hey, there are some of you are being way too sensitive that if you can't have enough, like, a good enough head on your shoulders to hear that type of criticism and be willing to grow, come on. Unimpressed by you, thumbs down.
That brings me to my next book. You guys know I love books, so I probably pulled too many for this episode to just give you these resources, but this is such a narrowed down list. Looking at my shelf, I was like, which ones am I gonna pull? But I haven't gotten the chance to read this one yet, but I'm looking forward to it. It's called White Rage: The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide by Carol Anderson. And like I said, this is a book that I haven't gotten to yet, but I think that it's really important to examine the power you wield as a white person with your emotions, because like Quinn said, that can be catastrophic for people, and it has been for many generations. And understanding, I wish that I could remember the quotes that I've heard from and their sources better, but there was it was a podcast episode with Liz Plank, I think, and two black men, but I don't know what the podcast was. It was a clip that I saw on the reels, and she had a podcast for a while that was about men, and so the men asked her, like, why do you think you as a woman have an authority to like speak to the culture of men? And she said the same reason, that you're better able to speak about whiteness than I am. She's a white woman, and she said, like, when you're not a part of the group that's in power, you know, like, everything about your oppressor. You know them better than they do because you understand like what's at work there. And
Yes.
for whiteness, when you have been raised in a culture where that's just the default and the standard, and you are told this is normal and anything beyond that is a deviation from, like, how often have we heard people telling a story where they indicate a person's race if they're not white, but it's just assumed that all the other characters are white.
Yeah.
And that sort of thinking is so deeply rooted that we don't even realize that, like, we are thinking as white people, whereas when you speak with black people or name another group, we're just focusing on blackness this episode, they are aware that this is like a part of black culture, and they know what their culture is because it hasn't just been treated as the default. Even if you're a black person that lives in a very black community, that is like your surroundings, because the broader like power structures in America are different. So looking forward to that one.
That just made me think of the fact I just started reading Wuthering Heights, and that movie is coming out
Quinn.
on Valentine's Day. I am peeved.
Because do you know I just read that too?
No.
Sorry.
Jacob
Okay,
Elordi
is so funny.
A white person cast as Heathcliff, who is not a white person in the book. And
yeah,
the director, who is a white woman, as far as I'm aware, of the movie, said that through her lens, that's not how she saw him. And to me, that is very confusing and very disheartening, and a huge letdown and betrayal to black people once again, or what, like, the way he was referred to was dark-skinned and clearly not a white character, so take away an important role from people of color once again, to me, is just like to miss this opportunity once again because you didn't perceive it that way, even though then listen, like, that is erasure of a black person.
But
It's
also
important.
in this case, I'm like, what do you mean you didn't perceive it like that? Because like Quinn said, he's described as dark-skinned, but it's a very recurring theme throughout the book, his like racial ambiguity. They don't name exactly where he's from, but they call him racial slurs, and they are characters that don't refer to him as him, and they will say like it and like a thing sort of situation, and that he's that like there's the recurring tone in the book of the ill treatment of this character is definitely tied to his skin color. And so it's not just the case of this is a story where the character, not that this like makes it better, but it's like, oh, they happen to be black, but that's not like necessarily a main theme. It's truly, to me, when I saw this interview of her saying I perceived him as a white character because someone asked her directly about it, I was like, that's extremely alarming. What do you mean? Like,
and we just can't think of this stuff as like, oh well, not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It has happened for so long. Like, think about when I truly sit down and think about how often I have seen like black roles portrayed on my screen that weren't depictions of slavery or something of the sort, and a commentary in that way. It is not like way less than what I would like to say. So that matters. It's just like, it's not okay to be ignorant and unaware. Like,
also
that's a statement.
Yeah, it's a statement, and I think it's very recurring to act like they're to not only erase race, but particularly in period pieces, to act like people of color didn't exist in this time of like Victorian England, and it's just not true. And it yet again is another way that white history gets so prioritized, not only prioritized, but to the point of acting as if like that's just how it was. There just weren't people of color then, and that's just crazy to act like in Europe in the 1800s that just wasn't a thing. What? Yes, it was, and even the writers of that time were talking about race. They were not doing it perfectly, mind you,
No.
But there was like that awareness, and that, I didn't know. I saw the preview for Wuthering Heights, and I was like, oh, that looks like a cool adaptation, and that I'd never read this book, so that prompted me to read it. And I'm sure you felt the same way of being like, oh, I want to read it before the movie comes out. It's a love story that I haven't read before. And then reading this, I was like, wow, I'm
glad that I'm aware.
Yeah, I might be a little scathingly critical going into my viewing experience, but am I excited to see the like set design and the costumes and Charlie XCX doing the soundtrack and all that? Yes.
Yeah, that's
I'm
cool.
looking forward to that, but we can still have our criticisms. Okay, I'm gonna share my last book recommendation. That is a nonfiction education read, and it's by no means the last resource I would want for you guys to seek out, but I just wanted to bring it up. I think I have certainly brought it up on the podcast before, but that just goes to show that it was something that was transformative for me and has informed my thinking a lot. It's Locking Up Our Own: Crime and Punishment in Black America by James Forman Jr. And he is a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and it really focuses on Washington, D.C., but it does talk sometimes about the nation as a whole, but about how the history of policing and the drug war and how we have gotten to a point of such high rates of incarceration for Black people, and the way that Black people have been complicit in that system. And even saying that, I want to be very clear that is not to shift the blame for this history to Black people, because he's not doing that, and it's just something that I think is worth reading to understand the ways that racism and the legacy of slavery and the Jim Crow South created an environment that led us to the point in time where we are now. It's very heavily researched and informational heavy. So even though it's not the biggest book, it did take me a long time to read because there's just a lot of content, but it was very worthwhile.
Well, to transition on that subject, I have a podcast recommendation. It's a series called Black Cowboys, and each podcast is focused on a specific figure. And the first episode that I listened to it in order, and the first episode is about Nat Love, who was a cowboy born into slavery and was, I believe, 14 or 15 when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and so actually ended up losing his dad, became head of the household, and ended up deciding, I want something, I need to pave some history for myself. And he loved horses and just was a natural, naturally inclined, getting on a wild horse and able to ride it out through all the craziness. There's a crazy story about him as a young kid getting on a wild horse and just bareback, nothing, holding on to the mane, and this horse taking off over multiple fences, just going and going, and him riding that out, which crazy. I wish I could say that could be me, but without a saddle horn to hang on to, I don't know. Anyway, I thought that this story was told really well. Nat Love wrote a memoir, so that's where a lot of this information came from that the host of this podcast is referring to. But I thought that that was a really interesting story, and something that in the podcast episode they bring up. You guys should go listen because it's way more comprehensive and super interesting. But something that they bring up is that it's very clear that Nat Love was racist and prejudiced against Native people, and the way he writes about them, and they had many interactions with each other through, he makes a venture into the West. I think he's born around Nashville, Tennessee. Anyway, there are multiple encounters and run-ins, and he's just very prejudiced, and I think that it's an important thing to be able to recognize and realize. But I also, as someone in this Western culture, wanted to acknowledge that I think it's great that these podcast hosts brought that up, acknowledged, hey, this should be acknowledged that he spoke about them in this way, and that is full stop not okay. The amount of white cowboys that clearly have racist views and actions, that those are just skirted over, and we just focus on how great of a horseman they are. I just found it interesting that people sharing about this, it's a Black father and son who host this podcast, and they're sharing about this. They're going to acknowledge that part of it, but so many white cowboys, they just get the pass that it's oh yeah, obviously they were prejudiced, but they were great horsemen, so that's what we're gonna focus on.
Yeah. That's like, I brought up to Brayden that we were going to do this episode, and he said, oh, a really interesting figure from medical history that I think most people don't know about is Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, who was the first person ever to successfully complete an open heart surgery. This was in the 1800s, and he was the first black doctor to open a hospital. I don't know if it's only in the US or anywhere. It seems like probably in the US. And it was the first interracial hospital in the US. Again, this is 1800s, so as we know, the civil rights movement happened in the 1960s in the US, so it's pretty amazing, those accomplishments. But to your point, then Brayden said, I haven't done a bunch of like research into the rest of his story, and he could be also a problematic figure because a lot of those surgeons in that era were, and I was just thinking about how that is worthwhile to acknowledge, and it's a little frustrating to think that so often people of color are just held to a different standard than white people are, and that the like problematic figures, hello, we have a day for Christopher Columbus, we have a day for like all these, not problematic is a little bit of a soft term for the like horrific the deeds that people have done that I don't know, do we want to go down into this episode talking about the fact that the President of the United States is named in the Epstein files? Like, hello, do we think if that were Barack Obama during his presidency, we would be in this same position? I'm just saying. Yikes.
Yeah, just saying. ... Why do, like, read between the lines? Everybody, hello? But yeah, that is something. Like, I think black people are held to such a different standard. It is so hard to believe and imagine that, like, it's not history. It's right now that still there is active prejudice against black people expressing their culture. Like, there is that prejudice still, and
there's still dress codes that say you can't wear your hair in natural styles. If you're a black person, it's not natural styles. If you're a white person, we're never asked to get our hair permed into an afro for a job.
So, yeah. Which white people wish. That's another thing I want to say, is that obviously white people have such an appreciation for sometimes appropriation and fetishization for so much of black culture. Like, but oftentimes we don't point out, hey, guess where this came from? So much of the music we love and listen to and celebrate, so many of the styles we wear and love, there is so much culturally. Can we bring up AAVE? I am not innocent. I am guilty of this, and it's something I am actively, like, noticing myself, how I am partaking in all of the things I'm talking about. I actively notice it about myself. I will listen to episodes and be like, it is not even my place to say something is clocking, like, in that way. Anyway, we don't need to go into the details, but growing up, so many of our people in our community that were white used AAVE very freely and frequently. If you aren't aware of what I'm talking about, it's African American Vernacular English, and it is not broken English. It is a dialect that is very intentional and a very easy to understand if you look into it at all. Like, people, it's not improper grammar, it's not improper language. It's a dialect that white people love to use when they're having fun and to try to be more bold and funnier and more hip, and again are often appropriating instead of appreciating.
Yeah, I think that it's when we think of what's even that idea of proper grammar is very complicated by the notion of who have been the powers at be to declare what's proper and improper, because as we know, thank you Amanda Montell, language does not actually have that parameter of, yeah, like ain't isn't actually a word because it became a word because people used it and it had a function that worked grammatically that people understood, but certain groups didn't like that speech, so they said that that's wrong, even though language does that all the time where it adds words and changes and all of that. Super interesting to think about. I'm gonna quickly go through two more books that are fiction books but by Black authors that I want to shout out because they're really great. Going to Meet the Man by James Baldwin is a short story collection, which I love. A short story collection. I just think that people should read more short stories. It's one of my favorites, especially by good authors. I just think that it is hard to write an effective short story because you don't have a lot of time to tell it and get your point across, and James Baldwin is of course one of like the great authors of the 20th century and a super worthwhile thinker. And where would I be without bringing up the death of Vivek OG? Broken record on this one. You guys know Akwaeke Emezi is an author Quinn and I bring up frequently on the podcast. They're amazing. They're a non-binary Black author that just writes beautiful work. Not more to say other than if you have heard our podcast consistently and have still not picked up this book, I just implore you to, please.
Yeah, it's very moving and has very important themes and definitely has heaviness, and we just need to be willing to participate in understanding that type of heaviness. This is something I'm feeling right now is once again the balance that we're trying to strike. And I have recently started listening to a podcast I just started listening called Marsha's Plate that one of our friends recommended to us last Black History Month, and I lost my train of thought. Hold, please. What was I just commenting on that you said? You just said what?
About the death of Vivek OG that I implore people to read. Akwaeke Emezi.
Oh, yes. Something that I don't know well enough the hosts. It seems like there's 3 hosts of the podcast, so I don't know who said it, but one of them gave the reminder of there is so much information and like heaviness that we are being bombarded with, and that it can end up feeling like I need to be a part of it all, but that you are allowed to rest, you are allowed to have like moments of disconnection to rest and regenerate. And then I liked their suggestion of maybe pick 1, 2, or 3 action items that are or topics, things you want to focus on that require your time, effort, like more learning in regards to, you know, political or social justice, so that it feels doable to manage and to continue to be like standing up for what you believe and not feel just immediately the like disassociation and burnout where you can maybe me with the Epstein files where it was like, okay, I took it to a point where I'm going to need to take a step back and not continue down the spiral rabbit hole, because that's actually not going to serve anybody for me to do, because I got to a point where it was like, I was not being a good person to Sean last night. I was not being a good person to myself. I was so triggered, truly, and beyond the ability to reconcile with, like, my current existence. Just felt like I need to fully disassociate, couldn't function, and come back down. So, like, it took way too long for me to be able to, like, recenter myself. And I think it's very important to be able to feel deeply and get serious and have a breakdown and, like, and be able to continue the steadiness over time, because I know that there are people right now that are just feeling like, I'm choosing to not be involved in any of this because it's too much, and, like, that's not going to serve me, and I just don't agree with that viewpoint.
Yeah. One person can't carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, but that's why I think you should seek out community with it, and with a friend or something, be like, these are conversations I want to have, and I feel safe and comfortable with you to have them, so can we do that together and not feel like isolated with it, I think is always important too.
A couple more creators that I wanted to shout out real quick, which I know at least we've spoken about one of them, but I really appreciate them both, are Alexis Nicole, aka Black Forager, who is such a vibrant and incredible person that I care so much to, like, that is something in life that is very important to me to continue to educate myself about, is eating, like, edible plants and foraging and understanding just the ecosystem of the environment we're in and how we, like, the effect we play. So she's very educational and fun and funny and smart.
She is such an inspiration for me for, like, plant identification. She is so good at, and that is a learned skill for sure, that you have to practice identifying plants to get good at it. But oh man, is it so cool, especially in Ohio where she lives and I think grew up, I'm not sure, but, like, knowing the number of native species there she does just makes me feel like I ought to know so many more native species where I am, and I want to. She makes me feel empowered to do so.
Me too. I sometimes I'm in the forest and I'm like, I feel very silly that I don't know. I'm calling this a pine tree. Don't know what it actually is. Help. We have to. I think it's really important to remain in touch with our environment. Robin Wall Kemmerer gets a special shout out just because she is so brilliant, and her book Braiding Sweetgrass needs to be on every bookshelf. Like, people have to read that. That is that transformed my point of view about the world so much, and I, in fact, think I have to reread it again ASAP, because just not detaching ourselves from the natural world is so important. And the classic analogy of how many of these brands that I'm putting up on the screen can you identify versus how many of these plants that are actually all around you and have been your whole life can you identify, and that is terrifying and humbling. And then one more I want to shout out is Blair Amani. She does the series on Instagram called Smarter in Seconds. And thank you to Black women for being so resilient to continue to educate widely people for free. You do not owe that to us at all. And nevertheless, they continue to do it. So taking advantage of free education and resources to be a better, more well-rounded person. She is someone that has so much understanding and context for intersectionality, and she explains concepts in a very digestible way in short form content that, like, I just think anyone could easily learn from her and have more awareness of how to be a better, more active participant in the world.
And her approach, I would say in general, is very inviting, and if you feel like intimidated to get into this work, I think that she provides a lot of grace for meeting people where they are and not having, not, again, stipulation, not that Black women should have to, like, have the perfect tone to be heard, but it is true that for anyone, sometimes it's hard to feel receptive to certain tones because of the guilt response and these other things that kicks in, and I think she makes a very strong attempt at just providing information in a, like, non-judgmental way.
Yeah.
There are so many countless other people and resources to be shouted out, but we don't think it's that useful to overwhelm in an episode when I know we already have a hefty list laying out there. I get so excited that I then am thinking about more, but I think we'll leave it there for today and just open up the door to you all. If there's a podcast, creator, movie, book, thinker, whatever, that has made a big difference for you in understanding Black history or anti-racism or just doing cool, badass shit that we would like to hear about, please let us know. It's awesome if you put it in our social media comments so then other people can see and benefit from that as well. And you guys know you can find us at the Q&R code, and our personal Instagrams and social medias are attached there. So at the Q&R code, it can be your home base. Thank you for being with us today. Don't mind if some white girls do talk about Black history, but I just will die on the sword of that it's for everyone to talk about. Why should all, like, of our incredibly diverse country be extremely educated on white history and the white point of view, and we don't have that same obligation? Because it's just human history at the end of the day. When we talk about history, it should be from a full perspective, but it hasn't been, and that's why we need to reconcile that by putting some extra emphasis on learning Black history, on learning American Indigenous history, on learning Mexican history. You have to put that intention out there because we didn't get a well-rounded view to start out with, and that is not a burden. That is an opportunity. And I really believe that it's just beneficial to you becoming, not only is it beneficial to your community, but just personally, I think that it's
better for everybody.
Invaluable. Yeah.
It's just one of those things where it's like, this is not just better for Black people. Don't look at it that way. It is better for everybody, for people to be educated and aware and equipped with tools. Be the best version of yourself you can be. Thank you for listening.
Rising tide raises all ships.
Yes. Whatever the candle one is, too. Lighting another candle does not dim your flame.
Yep.
So please leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed this, or rating rather, and share it with a friend. It is, I will be serious right now, it is your obligation, if you are a white person listening to this, to do some more research about Black history. I feel pretty comfortable making that sweeping statement. Hopefully that's cool with everyone.
It will
for
be
being
your
here.
pleasure. It really will
Yeah.
be. Thanks for being here. We will talk to you next week. Happy February, people.
Bye.
Goodbye.